Hi folks, if you've just joined us, right now we have approximately close to 500 people online, but we're going to give it a couple more minutes as many more have actually registered for this session. So we will be back to you in about 2 minutes and we'll get going then. Thank you. Okay, well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are. Two of our panelists are bearing with the time zones that they're currently in. Daniel Nivern is in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, and it's midnight there, and Di Van Workum is in Brisbane, where it's 3 a.m. there. And so we thank them and we thank all of you for joining us today. My name is Matt Byrnes. I'm the director of the Global Internship Conference and the CIEE Study Abroad Conference. And as you well know, we were due to meet in Vancouver, Canada, but for obvious reasons, we're unable to do so. But we're so honored that so many of you could join us today. Over 1,200 people have registered for this session, and which represents over 30 countries. So we really salute your dedication to your students through these difficult and trying times. And we're looking forward to meeting again in person, again in the near future, when time and the pandemic hopefully will be in the rear view mirror, and we look forward to gathering as a community again. When we did cancel the Global Internship Conference, the in-person conference, we reached out to you, the community, to see what you were interested in hearing about in our online sessions. And so we got overwhelming response on two issues. One is the health, safety, and security of having students go around the planet in this sort of COVID-19 era and post-COVID-19 era. So that's a session that we'll be having tomorrow afternoon at 1 p.m. And if you haven't registered for that, you're certainly more than welcome to join that session. But today's session is going to focus on virtual international internships. It's a 360-degree view of student, university, and employer involvement. And I just want to go over our panel. So I've already introduced myself. Our moderator today is Mike True with INTRUEITION. Mike might have the best timing of all of us. After quite a career at Messiah College, he retired at the end of last year, and so he's escaped some of the chaos that we've all experienced in the last couple of months. Having said that, he probably is the busiest guy on this panel. So, and then our panelists, we have Di Van Workum with Australia Internships. We have Dan Nivern with CRCC Asia and Virtual Internships. We have Elsa Zanatti Daniels with Aston University, and we have Emily Merson with Global Experiences. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the baton over to Mike True, who will be the moderator. We will take questions at the end of this session, so we've allotted about 10 to 15 minutes for questions. If you want to enter the questions in the chat boxes on either YouTube or on in the chat box for the Zoom session, please do so, and my colleague Alison Geltema will ask those questions. There'll probably be buckets of questions, so she'll have to cherry pick some of the questions and ask those at the end. And I also want to thank my other colleague, Patrick Rankins, who is working behind the scenes with the IT department and in supporting this, this broadcast. So without further ado, I'm gonna pass it over to Mike and the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. It's great to, I wish I could see everybody, but it's good to have you join us. So the first focus is on students. And Dan, I'd like you to start off and talk about why should students consider a virtual internship?
Well, thanks, Mike, and thanks, Matt, for hosting, and thank you, everybody, for joining this this webinar today. And first and foremost, hope everybody is safe and well in these testing times. It really has been an extraordinary few months, and one thing of interest for us, in particular, has been the increasing momentum and interest in virtual internships. This is an area that we at Virtual Internships have been very interested in and passionate in for ever since we launched the company, which was around 3 years ago now. And the first reason that we think that virtual internships are really important and attractive for students right now, alongside, of course, the recent changes in the pandemic, is that we think that virtual internships are actually mirroring the changing reality of the workforce and changing reality of the workplace. It's a workplace where people are now interacting with colleagues on video conference calls like Zoom or Microsoft Teams. People are doing training sessions in webinar format. People are doing project management work on Trello boards. They're communicating through Slack or other communication channels. And they're sharing information and looking at KPIs on platforms like Salesforce and other CRMs, and working with colleagues around the world and across various time zones. So a lot of these trends were happening anyway. Obviously, the recent pandemic has been a catalyst to expedite this change and these trends, but it was going in that direction anyway. And I think that a student who shows that they are successful in a virtual internship, it's a strong indicator that they are now career ready and they're going to be more successful in the workplace, whether that's a physical workspace or whether that's in the remote sense. And if I may, Mike, a couple of other reasons as well. The students will get sector-specific work experience. That could be in finance or in law or in marketing or NGOs. And according to widespread data and research, for example, on hired.com, a job marketplace, one of the main reasons that deters employers from hiring graduates is a lack of work experience. So this is a great resume boost. If it's done as an international internship, a virtual international internship, it also gives international exposure by working with a global company and honing in on intercultural influences and integral skills, helping again to bridge that skills gap between university and the workplace. And alongside all of this, it's flexible, it's accessible, it's sustainable, and students want to do it. There is some great research out there, including the Ivy Research Council in DC, a think tank, that says that over 90% of students are interested and willing to do a virtual internship. So there's a whole variety of reasons. I could talk also about the feedback and other points as well, but I hope that gives a few reasons as why virtual internships are interesting now, but I also think going forward in the future as well.
Great, thanks, Dan. Any other panelists want to comment on that question? Okay, if not, how about Di? What baseline qualities do students need for a successful experience? Di, you need to unmute.
Okay, maybe the first thing they need is great IT skills. So good morning from Australia, everyone. I'm going to use the 3 o'clock in the morning excuse for that. But I think first and foremost with the students is a desire to succeed. You know, I mean, I think if they genuinely want to succeed in the virtual internship and they're prepared to make that sort of personal commitment, that's a starting point, and that's what they need to demonstrate and be prepared for. Other things are like their organisation ability, the ability to plan, define timelines, agreed approach to when they'll do things and those sorts of things. So a lot of personal organisation, there's not actually someone right beside them 24/7 telling them what to do. So they need to plan in advance. I think they need to be mentored initially on some of that, but of course that's really important. Communication is another issue. It's not only about the time that you can going to communicate with your employers or supervisors or colleagues, it's which is the best means of communication. You know, are there times where you're better off using visuals like Skype or Teams or one of the various mediums? When there's a challenging issue or when you need specific support, I would suggest those sorts of things. And I think one of the things we've learned is to not always be reacting with your communication. Those sorts of things are really important for students. Take time. If you're going to write something in an email, make sure that you've thought through it, there's less emotions, and report writing, all those sorts of things. It's also getting a sense of the communication style of the organisation you're with. So communication plays a big part in success and building the relationships, which is what we want to do. Proactivity, motivation. Saying they want to do it and starting the project is great, but it's being able to continue through the duration of the project and see it through to the end. So putting steps in, I think putting steps in to make sure that happens. IT skills, like I just demonstrated what happens when you don't have great IT skills. You know, the mute is a classic example, but I think IT skills, knowing which mediums to use, becoming familiar with those mediums are all important. And I think initiative and being brave enough to ask questions is another issue. So yeah, that's a starting point for students in the virtual internship. I think many of the same skills that they would require in a workplace is required in a virtual internship.
Great. Anyone else wish to comment on those?
I'm happy to jump in. Hi, everybody from Annapolis, Maryland, on the East Coast in the US. I think it's really interesting. I know Dan's been working in the virtual space for a while, and you know, most of us are moving into it. It's a new area for us. But I think when students could self-select into virtual internships, they were probably having a different experience than the ones now where virtual internships is the only choice that they have. So now a lot of students who maybe wouldn't be their first choice, they're having to move into that space. And I think it's important when we talk about virtual internships, and all of us on the panel are global, that there are intercultural elements to their experience. They're not just working in a business culture they may be familiar with. They're dealing with the tech, the online elements, the new work skills, but then they're also going to have to think about the different cultural things that it may be difficult to understand because you're doing it through a filter of technology. Sometimes you learn those differences in business culture by being there in person and seeing and learning about the place that you're in. And once you're doing it in a virtual environment, you're having to get those cultural filters kind of in a different way. And you may not have a decoding system to do that because you're not getting any of the support that, you know, for example, when a student with us goes to Florence, Italy, they're going to be given a lot of intercultural framework from being there and chance to understand the culture that will help them be more successful in the internship. Now, like when we're moving that internship now to a virtual space and they're with a company in Florence, there is some extra work that needs to be done to help them appreciate that there is still a cultural difference, even though you're all using the same technology and maybe it seems more flat, that there is still things to learn in that intercultural way as well.
Good, good. Dan, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think it's a great point, and actually, as I think Em was alluding to, it's another learning outcome for the student. So some of these things are challenges, like working across different time zones, working across different cultures. But the reality is not everybody is going to be able to go overseas to Beijing or to Tokyo. So this is a more accessible way of giving people an introduction to that sort of global or international experience. And they will learn how to work with people across different time zones, how to get up at 2 in the morning, hopefully not too often, but to be on Zoom calls, and how to look at certain nuances through video conference calls. And again, that is reflecting the reality of the workplace and the future of work. The future of work, I think there's momentum moving in this direction, whether it's domestically, but even more so across international boundaries, is that we're going to be doing this through technology. We're going to be saving ourselves the commute time. We're going to be being more sustainable, and we're going to be being more efficient by doing this. And obviously there will always be some resistance to change. Not everybody likes sweeping societal changes. But I think we're already seeing from the past few months that there are some pros within it. Obviously, there are some cons as well, like everything. So there's a balance to be found. But I think it's really interesting how we're going to see how these learning outcomes play out over the coming years.
So Emily, all of us have already experienced the Zoom fatigue of online meetings. And so if we put ourselves in the student's place, just like many of us have experienced a kind of a fatigue with the online environment, any thoughts on that, about students experiencing the fatigue of online work?
I think their students probably of this generation are slightly better placed to handle and be more kind of resilient. I know that the certain age group we deal with, especially probably average age of 20 or 21, they do already spend a lot of time on screen. So there's a natural preference in a way to communicate virtually. So that's a good thing you can build on. But I do think that there is, in an internship, it's usually the beginning of learning about what it is to have work culture or work routines and systems and best practices and how to manage stress and how to be efficient. And these are the kinds of reasons people do an internship, is because they learn about how to be productive in a workplace. So I think that if you, especially when you're using a provider or a university has the capabilities to do some pre-work before the students start, they give them best practices. How do you set a routine? How do you manage your day? How do you create rest times when you're always kind of on and you could be working all the time? Like, how do you put those kinds of things in place? So I think that that's really where providers can be a great framework, because they've got systems that help support students, and where there is an advantage of having that overarching organizational support system that an organization can provide that's connecting to the student and the employer.
Great. And any other comments from panelists?
I just have one point on it, and it just occurred to me today. I think when sometimes we're feeling a little tired right now with the constant online webinars or Zoom calls, etc., I think it's actually part and parcel of a fatigue with the whole pandemic in general. We are, a lot of people around the world are under lockdown, so they're staying indoors. So when they're indoors all day and working from a single bedroom or their attic office or something like that, it can be a little more tiring and draining potentially. But I think going forward in a non-pandemic world, virtual internships will also be conducted by people sitting in coffee shops or WeWork spaces or in the park with friends, or even on vacation. And that might feel a little less draining than doing it under lockdown when you're confined to your own house. And I think another point linked to that is, sorry, I've forgotten where I was going with that. But yeah, no, sorry, another point with that is just about health and safety. I do think it's important that people have a good computer screen and a good workstation and a good workplace when they are working from home. So that's something that students, interns, or anybody should be thinking about during these times.
Great. Well, thank you all for those responses on the focus on students. And now we're going to move to a university focus. And Elsa, at Ashton University in England, what should universities look for when exploring and setting up virtual internships?
Well, I wouldn't want to make any sweeping statement. I suppose it depends what the focus of the university itself is. It really depends on the need of its particular student population. So we started working with virtual internships 2 years ago because Aston has got a very large population of students coming from ethnic minorities. And very often, and we are also an employability focused university. All our bachelor degree have got a placement year where students either go on study abroad or complete an industrial placement. If they are on a course with a language, we actually insist that the industrial placement is in the country where they're studying the language. So there is a real emphasis on gaining those skills anyway as part of their degree. But we had challenges with our with students from ethnic minorities, because very often either they were a part of the family where they needed to support members of their family, or their family was reluctant to let them go away. It was not really part of the culture. So we started, faced with those issues, we started exploring other modes of operating, because there's not just, so that was the primary reason when I first spoke to Ed Olroy about their project, when we actually met at the GIC conference in Detroit, and they told us what they were doing. We were already working with CRCC Asia. We were immediately interested as one of the options for our students. But then what we then decided to do was to offer it to our master's students. All our master's students have got to do an experiential learning stream as part of their master's degree, all our business school students. And one of the things the problem often is that they are doing this alongside writing up their master's dissertation. So the virtual internship was for us a way of giving them the opportunity to continue working on their academic work and be flexible in their working patterns. We also had a lot of students who had come to the UK because they wanted the experience of working in the UK, but also wanted an experience of working in a more global organization, or an organization in a different country. And that was helping us facilitate that. So this is how it all started. And the pilot last year worked really well. The students were really pleased with their experience. And the reason as well we chose to work with Virtual Internship is that they provide a career framework. They provide the students with the support of learning the skills that they need to engage with a virtual internship. They also make sure that they are able to articulate those skills to potential employers. So there is a whole, when you look for a virtual internship partner, you really need to make sure that they have a solid background in supporting the students. It is a challenging environment. It's a challenging environment because students, as Di mentioned it, have got to be extremely self-disciplined and committed to the project. If they're not, they will not benefit from it. And having both the support of the university and of the virtual internship organization is really essential.
So, Elsa, I'm going to let you continue here in answering this, but I'd like to open this after you give your thoughts. I'd like Di and Dan and Emily to join in on this. So what, and maybe explain what their specific organizations do, but what types of complementary programming do universities look for in third-party providers?
By programming, what do you mean exactly? Sorry, I just want to be sure I answer the question.
Oh, that's fine. So is there some type of, do they provide some type of a cultural immersion programming for a specific country? Do they offer help with the whole online experience? That type of thing, or do they have a course or modules that they provide?
They do. I mean, in the case of virtual internship, it's a 10 course. There are 10 modules in the course that the students follow throughout the whole internship program, where they step by step build up their competencies, including, as I said, the ability to express to potential future employers how they've managed to acquire those skills and how proficient they've been. So there is a whole, you need an organization who has really articulated and has a real employability framework supporting the whole internship. It's not just finding an employer and here you go. Virtual internships also very, very carefully monitor the relationship with the employer and are always there to support both students and employers if there are issues. And inevitably there are some, because it is a bit of a shock to the system for students suddenly to find themselves having to work like this independently, particularly. I mean, it was always challenging, but at the moment, it's even more challenging because many of our students are also facing additional anxiety because of the economic climate and the health scares and everything. So there is a challenge in terms of mental health as well. And the fact that the team at Virtual Internship is so present and so careful and so engaged with the students is a real reassurance for us as well. Does that answer your question? Or
It does. It does. And I think now I'd like to, Emily, if we want to just start with you, and then we'll go to Dan and to Di. If you want to talk about ways that you support students through programming. I think, Em, you focus on strengths of the student.
Yeah, so I think it's, you know, as like we all as internship providers move to a virtual option, which we have as an organization as well this spring, moving our students to an online environment so they can continue their semesters when they were interrupted on site. We've obviously been refining how we take what we do for all of strengths-based coaching and the pre-departure support, and then support all the way through the experience, as well as being that navigator for the employer as things and challenges do arise. We had to reimagine that when we thought about, well, what would it be like to do it online in a virtual environment where you have no contact in person, where you don't get to understand the workplace or the people in it and the culture of where you're coming from. We really said we needed to step up the one-on-one attention. We have a lot of cultural attention that we give the students, but also just making sure that we are giving them a journey. So we've created a kind of a 4-part journey through the experience, so that sits over the 8-week program or the 12-week program, starting with the strengths and using the strengths throughout the journey, seeing it more like a kind of a feedback loop where they're having experiences, they're thinking about them, they're reflecting upon them, they're putting it back into place, and that we've taken what we've always done, which is very high touch, customized experiences, and put them into an online environment where they're getting more attention because we feel like they're not having that one-on-one supervisor relationship as much as they would have if they were in an office environment and had the collegial support that you would get if you were in a workplace. So we've sort of crafted and redesigned what we've already done to put that into a new virtual course. But I know somebody in the chat mentioned language, and so students can choose to do a program in a different language if they want to in one of our locations, and that's been really interesting to see. And then I think also offering course for credit. So we have an add-on course for credit option up to 6 credits for the internship, and that's a secondary course component which has got its own curriculum that they can choose to add. So it's very interesting to see a virtual internship becoming credit worthy, but then also universities saying, well, I don't really want a full-time option, I'd rather have a part-time one. So we've been working with our universities really to respond to what they think they're looking for when they're moving forward with dealing with just this situation, this pandemic, but also thinking, wow, maybe a virtual internship could help solve accessibility issues, diversity issues, the ability to have a global experience without having to leave if that's not an option for students. So I actually am optimistic that it'll continue after the pandemic environment changes, and that we'll be doing more dynamic hybrid designs of programs that marry different kinds of experiences for universities to be able to give their students that global reach.
Great, great. Dan?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Elsa, for talking about our joint program that we've developed together. It's been a really exciting program, and we're happy. We've seen it grow in numbers, both in terms of popularity and the number of students going on it. So we'd be more than happy to talk about that as a case study to anybody who's interested. I think the first point to mention, and I'll probably keep reiterating this, is that it is different. A virtual internship is different to an in-person internship, whether that's domestic or international. And so our role as a provider, and I have a background in physical internships with CRCC Asia, but our role as a provider at virtual internships is different. And over the years, we've developed experience of how this works and how that manifests itself. And Elsa touched upon quite a number of them, but they're from start to finish. It's quite holistic. So it starts with the application process and giving support in helping it, especially as it's very popular. So how to deal with scale. The placement process and vetting of companies is different to in person. So I think that is an important role for the provider to play. The support during the program, again, is different. They're not on the ground with us as a cohort, so it has to be very structured as a program. We have internship coaches who are assigned at the midpoint and the end point of the program. We have the online career course, which has been nominated for awards. It is credit worthy as well. We have a school of records, so students can do 3, 6, or 9 credits for doing it. And as part of that, there is continuous mentoring and assessments as part of a feedback loop. I guess the final thing to mention about additional programming is that for our program, students can choose whether they want to go down a career track. So they choose a specific sector of their choice, and we will hone in on that sector. So it could be finance, law, marketing, etc. Or if the global component of the internship is most important to them. So if they say that their primary focus of this is to do an internship in Japan or in China, then we will make sure that that company is in China or Japan. Their language lessons will align with that, etc. So again, happy to talk more about the collaboration with Aston, but generally I think as we may talk about a little further, it tends to be quite a good complementary relationship between the university and the provider. And I guess one last thing, because we're talking a lot on the provider side, I think it's really great to have the university support as well. It adds an extra layer of support for the student. We really appreciate it. We can liaise with ELSA or other partners around the world. And I think that gives extra comfort to the student as they're navigating a new type of internship program.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Diane, how about you?
Much of the same as what both Emily and Dan said. I suppose we have an internship program supervisor that works with the students, and we have weekly webinars for the students. But one of the things that we noticed that the world was thrown in and forced into a remote working environment, and it didn't necessarily equip supervisors with the skills to manage team members or staff. And so how they do it in the working environment and building rapport and engaging and sensing things that you'd normally do in a working environment wasn't necessarily there. So we do a lot of support with the workplace. And we had a lot of pushback when, as I said, thank goodness for Dan and he's starting this virtual internship program way before we all realised it was going to be part of the world. But the feedback from many organisations is, hey, this works so well, we're going to continue this post-COVID. So I believe we're going to have a working force in future that'll need to demonstrate they can work remotely. So a lot of support for both parties. And structure like we normally do, submitting weekly learning plans that are signed by both parties to validate the agreed training is continuing, mentoring either the supervisor or the intern. You can have non-compliance or just miscommunication with either parties. And I think that relationship engagement with both parties needs a lot of support. So I find that the students tend to say things to us when there are times where they need to find a voice and be able to say things, and how do they say it and when do they say it. So a lot of mentoring and support both ways, where companies, supervisors don't engage. That's probably one of the things is that we almost have to put structure around for them to ensure that they are engaging and they're engaging sufficiently and their feedback is appropriate and those sorts of things. But yeah, much the same, the structure around it. The webinars, I find the students have really enjoyed that, but there's a social element to that, and it's interesting to see students connecting over those webinars and being able to exchange ideas, which I find is very valuable. So it's not only us saying what's happening, they're able to do this with others, and there's a great value in that process.
Great, great. Thank you all. That was excellent. We'd like to switch gears and go to a focus on employers. So Dan, I'm going to have you start out. What are some practical ways that employers can prepare for a virtual internship? Di touched on a couple of things that you all can do to help support them, but what should the employers do to prepare?
Thanks, Mike. And yeah, so I'm talking from experience. We've sent several hundred students on virtual internship programs, and by the end of this year, we're expecting to have had around 2,000 or so students doing virtual internships. And again, I think I touched upon it earlier, but just to reiterate, it is different to an in-person internship, and that is important for us to convey to employers. Luckily, as Di touched upon, employers are now more more used to this concept, so we're not going in as fresh as we were at the very beginning. But overall, I feel like it requires more planning in advance. It needs to be a more structured experience, and it needs to be less ad hoc and more project-based. So just to give a little bit of insight into the way it works in terms of our process, the initial stage is the vetting process. Starts very basically with a student filling in a form on a website. We then have a phone conversation with the company, and we confirm minimum number of employees, English-speaking supervisor, business license that they have to submit. Outside of lockdown, we look at the environment that they're in. And if that all goes well and they pass that initial vetting process, they get into our host company portal. And it's here where they get lots of information about how to run a successful program, how to work on a project with a virtual intern, how often they should check in with the student, what the best structure is, etc. So this is, once they've done this, they submit a project plan. And that gets developed over time. So we have a linear placement process, which includes an interview between the student and the company. And if that goes well, the company will submit a week-by-week project plan. I think it's really important that they do it week by week in advance of the program, because again, it has to be much more structured. We advise the company to do a supervisor video introduction using our integrated video technology that we have. And then we advise that the company should speak to the intern in advance of the program. They should agree a schedule based around their timings and their own schedule for weekly check-ins. And we also ask the company to explain the digital tools being used by the company. We give advice to companies and to students on the sort of platforms that might be used. Again, it could be Trello, it could be GChat, it could be Slack, but it's really important that the students get that in advance of the program. And then day one, whether it's a physical or a virtual internship, is really important. That onboarding day for the introduction. So the supervisor is encouraged to talk about expectations from the program, what the working hours will be, the deliverables and the communication methods. Hopefully bringing other people into the conversation as well from across the company. And then finally, during the internship itself, the things we advise at least a 30-minute direct face-to-face contact, or at least a phone call between the supervisor and the intern. We encourage, or we recommend, that all supervisors must be quite timely in their feedback. So if there are task-related questions, the supervisor must be there in a timely way. And I think I mentioned it earlier, is this feedback loop. And we do this through a weekly project checkpoint. So it's really important that the student talks about what they've done, what they've learned, and what they want to do in the week ahead. And the company gives feedback, and that must happen on a weekly basis. And we do this in conjunction with our program experience manager. To supplement all of this, we have placement managers who liaise directly with the companies. We have program experience managers who are helping the students. And we have an internship coach who is there through the midpoint and the endpoint of the program, all alongside the online curriculum career bridge that we run, and the webinar similar to DI that we have as well. So all of these things, I think, help to ensure it's a structured program. Again, employers have to put some work in up front, but we're finding from employers that the feedback is really positive. As Di alluded to before, a lot of employers are actually wanting to continue this in the future. There is a lot of work, but in some ways there's less mental strain on the employer because they don't have to oversee an intern who's in the office on a day-to-day basis. They give them a specific project, they focus on that project, and it's a much more structured approach as opposed to ad hoc. So all of those things hopefully contribute towards a two-way relationship that is positive for both the intern and the employer.
Great. Anyone else wish to comment on that particular that particular subject about employers and how they can be better prepared?
I'll just jump in and just say that I think, again, thinking about those employers that go to approach a virtual internship as a host employer, knowing that they want to have it virtually, and then the transition for people who have traditionally hosted on-site students to an online environment. I think that there obviously is different sophistication and use of technology, and I think that that's where you do need to help both sides, but you may have more confidence with some employer relationships because you've been working with them already for 5 or 10 years, and versus those that might come to you as a new employer, but only a virtual employer. You have less oversight over the the actual company's physical presence and who they are and what they do, because you may not have met them in person. So I think that there's as this becomes a thing where maybe 100% of students who do internships are doing them virtually, I think there is a different sort of nuanced approach with employers about what do they need, because some companies may be more or less sophisticated and may be thinking that some things may work and they may well work. I think we're all a little bit in a new environment, and we need to be flexible to help make sure that we get engagement from employers and help the students have success in different work environments. Because unfortunately, virtual internships are fantastic, but there are lots of fields that can't sustain, lots of industry fields that can't sustain virtual learning. So it will be, if this becomes more of a status quo, it will be interesting to see how we site, but may not be able to do virtually.
So Di, let me ask you a question. So some employers are going to be anxious. They know this is what they need to do, and yet it may stir up a bit of anxiety in them. So what are some ways that the program providers, third-party providers, as well as maybe even the university from ELSA's standpoint, that could offer some support to them? You're muted, Di. There you go.
First of all, it's taking the time to understand their anxiety. You know, some of the feedback we're getting from companies that we've worked with for many years is the fact that the borders are shut. One, there's high employment. Two, politically, I'm worried, you know, if I'm bringing internationals into a workplace, even virtually, is this what I should be doing? Do you know, so there's a lot of concern from people. And of course, because the physical borders are shut, we don't want the borders shut to internationalisation. So we actually went to government, we went to regional development and looked at recovery strategies and things like that, so that we could look at strategies to support companies getting through this process. So the students are getting a win and the companies are getting a win. I don't think it's a process, the recovery process and the transition that we're going through now is something that can be easily resolved. We engaged government and got their support, are working with areas and locations and industries to hear what they've got to say and trying to match up their needs with the needs of the students. So I think that's one big thing. I think, and just being having them part of the process. And having them understand the risks associated with closing all of the borders and not continuing to engage with internationals. I think we have a responsibility there for the students and for internationalisation. We've come so far, we don't want to see this phase put us back. And the other issue, of course, that we hear is security, and how do we manage security and what can we do with security? Because they're worried, like, okay, the student's in another country, what protection do I have? You know, my IP and all of those sorts of things. So it's what security mechanisms we can put in place, whether we can have project briefs and only access to certain resources and those sorts of things. So yeah, I think those sort of conversations are necessary, getting supporting material, having a strategic goal for regions, for cities, and being respectful of the changes that companies are going through. Is very big, and having them heard and part of the decision making on how things should be managed.
Great, thank you. Emily, I know that you had some concerns about security issues. Did you want to speak to that anymore? Di raised that. Did you want to speak to that any further? You're on mute. There we go.
Yeah, Di's absolutely right. I think everybody going online and working had seen a huge rise in, you know, phishing and other sorts of technology security issues that everybody is being impacted by. And I think the risk for an employer, and I can understand their anxiety, would be, I've got an inexperienced person, they're not in this country, I can't watch them, they're using their own equipment. How can I be sure that they don't bring down my entire kind of system, or they don't let some sort of bug in, or they don't offload information that is very sensitive to an employer? I know that that's something that's been brought up. We have agreements with employers. We sort of have strengthened those a little bit, looking at those again to see, is that a framework that we can try and provide some security to the employer about the sort of training and preparation we would do on our end, and expectations about their training with students. And maybe if they're very anxious, limiting access or getting across the internet, because I do think that it's a real concern. Like, it's not just a perceived one, it is actually something that everybody should be very concerned about, is a lot of, fake emails. A student might be easily duped into engaging with things that are not actually correct for the employer. So I think that that's something that needs to be addressed very much to build confidence in students doing these kinds of experiences. I just saw a chat question that was a follow-on from earlier, and it was about fields that do well and maybe not so well in the virtual environment. And from our experience, obviously some things are just logistically, or from a, again, security point of view, things like psychology, like things that to do with interrelating with clients or learning about sort of at-risk populations in person. We do a lot of placements in sort of social services areas and psychology around the world, and you can't find a way to do that with patient-client privilege in a virtual environment that we have yet worked out. It may be that there is a way eventually, but then other things like fashion design, pattern cutting, things that are done, or beading, things that are done in person, might be very difficult for anybody to be very useful at from a remote situation. But then obviously anything to do with technology, marketing, business that is already being conducted virtually and done a lot on the computer are natural places for students to find good experiences all around the world. Great.
Well, thank you all for answering the prescribed questions here, but I know that our participants have a lot of questions as well. And just so that everyone knows, we're going to, Allison is going to try to bunch these together. So if we've had a lot of people asking a similar question, we're going to try to address those. Unfortunately, probably won't be able to get to all of them. So Allison, I'll let you take it from here.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. There was a number of questions around how long is the typical virtual internship?
Sure, I'm happy to jump in on that. So ours tend to be between 120 to 300 hours, normally spread over 8 to 12 weeks. One of the great things about virtual internships that we found, not only the scalability of it, but the accessibility of it, but also the flexibility of it. So we're having a huge number of students who are doing it as a standalone program this summer. But we do also work with a number of universities who have integrated into their university courses or degrees, like the University of Adelaide, for example. So students can be doing it alongside their university degree. So in cases like that, it will be a shorter amount of time. It would be between 10 and 20 hours per week, as opposed to between 20 and 30 hours per week, which we normally do in summertime programs. And just on the University of Adelaide, I know that Em mentioned the different career fields. I think what's been really exciting actually is that I think you can be really creative, and the University of Adelaide makes me think of that. They do a degree which focuses on the wine industry, and we hadn't thought that that would be a perfect sector for doing a virtual internship. But we have actually worked with students doing that course and found really creative placements with them on consulting for doing work for a wine consulting company, for example, in China. And looking at consumer trends and the growth of the industry and doing market research reports. And I think, you can be creative across a variety of industries. Engineering is actually our second most popular after business and finance. And again, happy to talk through various project placement plans that we've worked on with companies and with students for the engineering sector. So to answer the question again, normally up to 300 hours and across 18 different career fields.
Okay, great. There are questions around if the internships are for credit, not for credit, what's the average stipend payment, those sorts of questions.
I'm happy to answer the credit one. I think they can be both. You don't have to get credit, but you can get credit. We have a school of record, an online course. The students can get credit through us. They can get up to 6 credits for the internship and then add on other courses to get up to 12. obviously depending on how long their placement is. But then also we work with universities. So the university may want to offer credit for a part-time internship in a semester for 3 credits, or they want the full-time summer internship, and they'll offer credit themselves. But there's no requirement that they need to do it. I know there's a lot of things to do with laws and payments, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if Daniel knows the answer to this, but from everybody's research that we've come across, there really is not a global methodology for being able to offer paid internships for a virtual placement that's got 2 different parties in 2 different countries without there being some kind of environment for that regulatory situation. So I think that it's probably not realistic to expect payment unless maybe you're doing an internship in the US and you are a US citizen, but or likewise Australia or an Australian placement. So, but I'm not sure. Maybe there's somebody else out there who knows the answer to that question.
Yeah, actually, we found exactly the same. It's an evolving picture, and there is nothing. There's not much legislation around it yet in the virtual internship space. What we do know is that it would be much more complicated, especially from a taxation perspective, and from the company's perspective in particular, if there is payment. So like Em and Di, we both come from backgrounds of running physical internships. Most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time those internships are run paid. And it's the same with the virtual internship program. I think what is kind of more exciting or particularly of interest is the lower cost. Obviously, you're reducing the cost of the international travel, of the international visa, of the international accommodation. And as mentioned before, it can be done alongside studies. So it does make it more scalable and more accessible, and reduces a little bit of that divide between those who can and who can't. But it is still an unpaid internship, and it has to be seen as an experience that is a building block that's making students more employable and giving them work experience that they may otherwise not be able to get.
And if I may, from a university point of view, yes, that's exactly what we are presenting to the students. First of all, there's the flexibility. It's only up to 300 hours, so the commitment is limited. They can decide whether to work 10, 20 or 30 hours a week. They can, they really can, in agreement with the employers, they can really manage how they're going to lead the project. There's a lot of flexibility in that respect. And it is also, what we are telling them is that you are really getting ready for the world after your degree. What you are doing at the moment is applying the things that you've been learning and learning the skills that are going to enable you to use all that knowledge. And you are being prepared. So it's not in terms of if you want return on investment, it's a very small price to pay. Currently with Aston, we have been running the virtual internship program free for students. That means that we have offered scholarship places. So students are selected. We are trying to make sure that really they are committed to the project, and we offer a limited amount of places. Having said that, if students want to pay for the program themselves, they can do that. But our aim was, first of all, to see how the whole thing was going to develop. And I must admit that what's been absolutely fantastic is, aside from the flexibility for students to work alongside their program, aside from the fact that there is that whole career bridge program which supports the whole internship, what's really, really interesting is that students are also now developing intercultural competencies, because they are working with students from other countries in teams on projects. So not just learning the company culture, because employers do really communicate with students, but they are also experiencing the cultures of other students who are part of the projects they are working on, because we are supporting, I should have said that possibly at the beginning, but the type of virtual internship we are currently supporting with virtual internships, the organization, are group projects. So they are not on their own working on a particular project.
Yeah, Elsa, thanks again for that, for reminding me of that. Actually, and Em touched upon it a little earlier. It does bring into perspective various permutations and hybrid programming that we can look at. One of them is group projects. So our partnership with the University of Adelaide, for example, is 4 students for every company, and for each project within the internship, there is an assigned team leader. So you're getting some leadership skills, but you're also getting teamwork skills. But there are also some really interesting programming you can do with 1 or 2 different universities. So linking students from different countries in a group project, working for a company globally. So that might sound like a lot, but it does really hone in on that international experience and the intercultural skills that can be learned from this sort of programming. And again, is something that is particularly exciting when you start doing things in the virtual world, when you've got companies from around the world and students from around the world with that level of accessibility, flexibility, and scalability.
Allison?
Okay, there are other questions around managing data protection from a student's perspective with privacy issues, and is there any way to overcome that?
I don't think I have the answer to that. I would only say that, like with it on site, you would just recommend the employer make sure that there's adequate training and safeguards in place to ensure that there isn't huge exposure on either side.
Sure, and yeah, kind of similar to what Em is saying. I mean, first of all, to put things in perspective, a lot of these things around safety and security exist in physical internships as well. If anything, actually, virtual internships reduce some of the risks involved. That's not to say, and with everything, with all of this conversation, there is a balance to play. So neither is better than the other. They have different pros and cons. So it's not to say that there aren't risks involved in the virtual sense as well. And I think data security protection is one of them. We train our host companies about protecting student data. And we also train students about protecting host company data. And actually we have, as part of our host company portal, we have an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement that students have to sign. We have our own agreement with the host company as well, making sure that they're sensitive with data in line with GDPR for EU companies and students. And the other thing that we're sort of, while we're in this realm of security and safety, is anti-harassment and cyberbullying. And helping students to identify when that's happening. They might not actually realize that they're being bullied or coerced into something, whether it's work-related or an opinion. So we have policies for the host company, and we have policies for the students and training for the students, so that aware that this might be happening. Again, our experience of it is reduced. It is not something that is systematic in a virtual internship program, but I think it is really important to be aware of it, address it in advance, preempt that it could happen, and have that clear and open conversation with both the students and the host companies.
Di, you wanted to say something.
I did, and probably much of it has been said, but I think just limiting access, making sure that I found that if students were actually doing the internship for academic credit, they risk their credit. And that's reassuring for organisations, because students don't want to complete an internship and risk their credit. Companies realise that. So having the support of universities and having students on structured programs makes a big difference. But yeah, access limiting is probably one of the best strategies we've found with students. And trust, I think there are a lot of companies that, again, I'm not having my staff work remotely. They won't do anything. They'll be doing their washing and they'll be having a party at home, and, you know, where, and probably there is an element of that. But what they've realized is that the world can go on, and they're getting just as productive results as what they would do with people working from home. And the same with students, whether they're working from home in France, Germany, or wherever. So I think we've come a long way in those sorts of things in the last few months.
Excellent. Can we have one last question from Allison? And we're just nearing the end of time here.
Yep. So final question, I got to make it a good one. Are companies even prepared and welcoming of an increase in intern diversity? What can international interns offer companies that local interns cannot?
Well, there's lots of things to say about that. I think the world's been shown to be very small through all this you know, the pandemic experience, and the idea that the future will still be global and more interconnected is even more true. So I think that there is a breaking down of walls. While we can't physically travel, we can virtually travel. And I think that we've seen how relationships have actually become stronger through the virtual environment that they have been before. So I hope that optimistically we see increased connectiveness between countries and between cultures, and there are fewer limitations if we're in a virtual environment to anybody's accessibility to those. So I'm hoping that we see more engagement, and of course optimistically I hope that that's the case.
Yeah, I think those are all great points. I mean, there are various reasons why a company wants to hire virtual interns. Building their own brand awareness, getting a particular project done, giving leadership training to young management. But at the core of it, or a lot of it, can be creating a new talent pipeline. And of course, getting students from diverse backgrounds is a way of getting some of the best talent around the world. And virtual internships allows that more than any other approach, because students, again, from various backgrounds or underrepresented groups, or students with disabilities, or students who have family commitments, may otherwise not have been able to go and do those internships. So the company is benefiting from that diversity and richness of talent. There are also numerous studies done about how diversity in the workforce is better for the overall team and productivity of the team and the outcomes of the company. So it really allows all of that. And I guess the final point on this is I think there is a social impact element potentially in this sphere. Again, it's an evolving world, and it's an evolving space. We don't have all the answers, and it's important not to get carried away with societal change, but we are talking to students, universities, and institutions around the world, not just in the UK or the US or Australia, but working with a lot of students in the Middle East, in Vietnam, where I'm based right now. In Africa, we're working with an organization that helps students who are refugees. And because of the accessibility of it, and because of the lower price point, and because of the reduction in barriers of doing these programs, there are creative ways that we can work on. So I'm not trying to overstate this place. I think there is still a lot to do, and we need to improve accessibility to computers and to technology in countries like Indonesia, for example, which has a lower rate of connectivity than somewhere like Austria or Denmark. So there is still work to be done, but I think it does open up really exciting avenues and areas for providers, universities, governments, and institutions to explore.
Well, thank you. I'm just going to jump in, and I want to thank the moderator and the panel for this fantastic discussion. I'll be perfectly honest, when I put it out there, these two sessions today and tomorrow, I wasn't sure if we were going to get 12 people or we're closer to 1,200 people. So, so there's clearly an appetite to learn more about supporting our students. And it's something that we would like to put on more of these sessions. And we can see almost in retrospect how things are going with the employer piece. So the next time we gather, we'll be sure to have employers involved. And also, I just want to say that if you want to reach out to me with any particular questions, I can forward them along to our panelists. But also, we're going to post this PowerPoint presentation, and we will add everyone's contact information. So if you want to contact directly to the panelists, you'll be able to do so. A couple other housekeeping notes is, so like most organizations, we've had some changes over the last few months. So people like Kate Moore and Brett Berquist, who did such a great job with the content, they've stepped away from the content committee. So those will be some opportunities that will open up for those who might be interested in future conferences to be involved with developing the content, and also other leadership opportunities will be announced as well. I want to take this opportunity to thank Brett and Kate and also Tony Johnson, who have been integral to the spirit and the success of the Global Internship Conference. Quite frankly, it wouldn't be what it is today without them. But I also think that there's opportunities for us to democratize what we have here and spread out the leadership around the world. So looking forward to sending out some more information on that. So unfortunately, we're over time, which I'm normally a stickler of time, but we had such a great discussion. So I want to thank again the panel for their time and their efforts in putting this all together, and for some of you getting up at ridiculous hours or staying up late to be part of this this session. We're all grateful to you for that. So thank you. I'm going to give you a little golf clap. And we hope that others will partake in our health, safety, and security session tomorrow, which will give you some ideas about navigating this world, both the COVID-19 in existence, but hopefully in a retrospective view of what we've learned over the last few months and how we can keep our students safe. So with that, I also want to thank Allison and Patrick for being on the back end, and all of my other colleagues that have helped me put this together. Is very much appreciative, and thank you as a community for being for doing all the great work that you're doing. And on that note, I don't know if the panel wants to say goodbye, but I'll leave it up to you, and have a great rest of your day wherever you may be. Excellent.
Thank you.
everybody.
Stay safe,
Bye.
everyone.
Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, Matt.